with us her earliest memories and thoughts of her family and Monmouth Junction and South Brunswick. Okay. Where did you want to start? You want to speak about the farm first and then get into your life on Ridge Road? I think that the township would appreciate a background on the Stewart farm.
That's my mother's family, and I believe Grandpa Stewart purchased the farm about 1888. He came from Franklin Park, having just lost his wife, so he came with his 7 children to be raised here on Ridge Road. The picture on the coverlet shows the barn, which was on the right-hand side of Stouts Lane. The Stouts Lane separated the barns from the house. There is a picture of the house, I believe, among the pictures down at the building.
And that house would be on the...
That would be on the left of Stouts
I think
Lane.
that was the controversy.
So,
that's on the South Brunswick High School property.
Yes, yes.
We used to play there when I was a kid. The O'Hagans and Rinks and myself.
Oh, sounds familiar names. Of course, the buildings were demolished, the barn buildings were demolished, I believe, in the late 20s when the ground had been sold and we were going to have a development in there, and it was all laid out in paper streets.
In the 20s?
I believe it was the late 20s. And that never materialized. The house was moved to Stouts Lane down just below the hill. That was after the Flemmers, who had owned it for a while, sold it to the Phipps estate, and he was given the privilege of taking the buildings off the ground if he so chose, and he moved the house down. Unfortunately, both the house and an old hay barn, which was up in the back, were not taken care of when you put it down there, and vandals got to them and partially burned the house. So then it was demanded that he destroy all the buildings. So that ended the Stewart buildings and that.
Well, Flemmer did own them at one time.
Yes.
It's not like him to let old buildings...
No, he was great in preserving.
Right.
And because, you know, the place is just beyond us where the O'Hagans lived. He took that house and put it across the road down on the ground that he had previously purchased.
Now, Butch, did you play at the O'Hagan home on the east side of Ridge or
on the opposite side the railroad tracks is on.
I think we call it the north side.
The north side, yeah. Be the north side.
North side.
Yeah. And then the old hay barn that's in that picture was back halfway down Stouts Lane just about. And it was a big old hay barn. Every time it rained, we would go up and play in the hay bales.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
See, that was when my grandfather bought the property, and I said that it was a small hay barn, because that was one of his means of making a living, was to raise hay and then ship it into New York later on. And so he increased the size of the barn.
It was a big barn when we were kids,
yes, yes. And just next to that, just a little to the left, there originally was a small house, my mother said.
Next to the barn, or was
the old barn? We're talking about the hay barn now, which is up in the field.
Right.
And there was a small house there, but that burned down some years,
Mhm.
well, long before I knew anything about it.
So, you went to school where?
I've always lived on Ridge Road. I was born in the Stewart homestead. And then I went to Ridge School.
What was that like?
It was a one-room school. It was the third Ridge School building that had been built on Ridge Road.
Third school building?
Yes. I have a,
Is that where Sarah Taffner lives?
yes,
Okay.
yes. Then, of course, we had the one teacher took care of all 8 grades. She took care of the furnace. She took care of janitorial jobs of sweeping the floor and all those things that are required to keep it
And her
in
name?
shape. Well, I started out with a Mrs. Volk. I've just made a booklet of the history of the Ridge schools.
Good,
And
very good.
I have her picture of
Mhm.
our class, with she's standing in the group. I'll show it to you.
Okay.
And then I had a,
Excuse me. Would you want to stop and do that now, or would you
There's
rather do
plenty,
it at the
they can always
end?
edit this, you know, and they can,
Okay,
you
all
can
right.
just keep it running, do it, you can go get the book if you want, I can stop, it doesn't matter.
Whichever would be easiest for you.
well, perhaps if we fill it right in.
Okay.
Oh, great, we want a picture of that.
Well,
She
I
was
think
every,
Ruth must have that.
she was
one.
every, well, let's just make sure that,
And
you get that one, Butch.
Mhm.
this is the second Ridge School. And this was located where Dreyers now live,
Mhm.
that house. And this
Mhm.
was when they, in 1913, they built the new Ridge School, which is really the third building.
Mhm.
And then this building was moved after Augusta.
The second
The
Ridge,
second
right,
Ridge
was moved
to Perrine Road,
across the street, huh?
adjacent to the schoolyard of that third building.
Mhm.
And then recent years, the family added on a shingled area, a little room out there. But you can still see the design of the building resembling that.
Now, did you, give this information to the press, or, is?
No, this was done by the Payon people who wanted to sell the place.
Oh, I see, okay, it was
that's-
as a real estate, sale
Yes,
picture.
yes.
Okay,
Mhm. And,
now that was the second.
yes, that's the second building.
Okay.
The first one was built, according to the Stout history, the first building had been up just about where the third building is today, the first building. And then Stouts say that that original small building was moved across the road and down to where the Dreyer home is now, and enlarged to make it this building.
Okay, the second one.
Yes. Then, let's see, we got that. And then we have, this is the new building. And then we have Miss Murmur, who became Mrs. Harry Barlow.
This is a picture of Miss Werner, did you?
Murmur, double N,
M-U
double R,
N.
M-A-N,
Okay.
N.
know some of those people?
Oh, they're all named here, yes, because the Landis is Helen Landis, and you know the Mackenzies, Myrtle and the Gordon girl, and Charlie Skank, and Howard Skank, Eva Potts, Eva Mackenzie, and this was her brother, Donald.
Were these Pottses related to the Kingston Pottses?
Yes, she married into the Potts, John Potts. Eva did. Eva was a Mackenzie girl. But this is what's gives me a chuckle. This is brother and sister. And what is that Don doing to Eva? Eva is not happy.
Sure doesn't look happy.
But this is a great friendship here with Myrtle and the Mackenzie and the Gordon girl. They have their hands locked together.
Oh, yeah.
And then,
Now you were one of how many in your family?
Four lived to grow up, and there were 5 in our family, but the baby died at a young age.
And they were older or younger?
They were all younger.
All younger, so you would be the first one to go to school on the ridge,
right,
in your family.
Right. And this is where I come into the picture. I found my old report card.
There's Mrs. Vogue again.
That's this was Miss Murmur. And then this is Mrs. Bull. This was Mrs. And well, there's George Skank and his sister Mary, and Mildred Landis.
So the Skank farm and the Skank farm and the Landis farm were all there in approximately 1923.
Yes,
before.
yes. Oh yeah, before.
And it was always the Skank farm.
Well,
we don't know that. Maybe
no.
Billy mentioned that.
Well, the Browns owned that Skank farm.
Okay.
Oh, no, wait, there's 2, maybe, which was he referring to? See,
I don't know that he did.
Oh, well, the farm they were living on when these kids were going to school was on the north side of Ridge Road, where Dow Jones has just destroyed that big house in the back. That was the Skank farm. And there's a barn for cows, and they had dairy and ran a milk route. Then later, Mr. Skank somehow inherited the farm across the road. And that farm he did own. But the children were all grown by that time. And,
so that 1923 picture is Mildred Landis.
Yes.
She taught me in 3rd and 4th grade.
Oh, really?
Yes. In fact, she was pregnant for Mary Ann when I was in 4th grade.
Gracious sakes. And Earl Sean, if you
Oh, yes.
name. Yeah, that's he. Earl Rink.
Earl Rink. Gotta get this one. And Bob Cull. Okay.
Yeah, the John Walker. And then me. Apparently, all boys were there.
You got in the wrong row there. Hanging out with the boys.
Yeah, yeah. And then this is 26.
Okay.
And they're pretty much.
And they're still going to the Ridge Road School.
Oh yes. It's my brother, Theodore.
He was the flyer.
No, he was the farmer. Yeah, this is the flyer, Richard.
Quite a record in World War II that you
Yes.
should mention when we get there.
And Let's see, here's some more Landises. It's Elwood,
Mhm.
and Rinks, Edgar,
Mhm.
and the Crabs, and
Now,
because he went to war and never came home.
oh really?
Never
World,
knew what happened.
World War II.
Yes. And then this other Landis family came in the picture. This is Hiram Landis's family, Virginia and Irma.
That was that.
But the other Landis
Is that
was
B?
a
Is
Howard.
this B's family?
Yes, yes, it's her. They're sisters of B.
And her father was Hiram.
Yes.
Okay. And they lived down where the Monmouth Junction School is now.
Yes, that's where it started. I mean, of course, then they moved
And they went
up.
to school here.
So
you're-
they came on. The family moved up on Prime
Okay,
Road,
all right.
and that's when they
okay.
started coming
Okay,
to
this-
Ridge School.
There's a little controversy over when Monmouth Junction School was built. So maybe we can,
Well,
this is something you have.
and now this is another teacher, Miss Chamberlain. She taught in 20.
Well, when did Mrs. Weaver teach in these schools?
She taught over in the second building,
Okay.
down in the second building.
And that was in,
Would I think I have it suggested.
because we have 1901 for that school. And this kind of,
Let's see, third building, second building. See, I've got some information somewhere. I've got it footnoted. So, she attended the second Ridge School as a student, and then returned about 1906 as the teacher
Mhm.
for apparently just the 1 year.
So that was in 1906. She came back as the teacher
Yes.
here on Ridge.
In the second Ridge School.
Now, the Rowlands lived in Monmouth Junction,
Oh, yes, the Rolandville, they call it
Right.
sometimes.
right? Mrs. Weaver started to teach in 1906, okay.
Well, that's,
It's documented right here in this picture. So, we have to talk after that because it's on, let's just see.
let's see, we're up here, aren't we? And we just had Miss Chamberlain. And then we had our last teacher in Ridge School was Miss Ball, Miss Ethel Ball. And she had a tendency to work more get the mothers interested, so that
All that,
we got an opportunity, big event. We walked up to George Prime's apple orchard for a picnic. And then the next year, we got enough mothers who drove to take us all the way into Trenton, to Canmore Park.
boy, I remember those trips. They were great trips.
So
I didn't realize that Ridge Road classes attended that into the 30s then, didn't it?
it went to December 3rd, then Miss Ball, or Mrs. Marsden, resigned December 1930. That is a mix-up on that in the records. I noticed sometimes they say it was in 1925, there were no more one-room schools, but it's not, it went up to December 1930. Because
Okay.
I was there. And then the 20-some students were sent to Dayton, bused to Dayton. So that was
Students bused.
Dayton, which
Well,
was
so you have,
4 remaining schools. So at that time, the township, in 1931, the township had 4 schools.
okay. Would you say Monmouth Junction may have opened around 1920? or
You
early?
mean the village?
The school.
The Monmouth
the school.
Junction School, the one,
Oh, no, that opened up in the late
1901?
I think it was open before that.
Maybe Ruth can help us with that.
Oh, I'm sure she must have that data. The first Monmouth Junction School was over across the tracks.
Whereabouts?
Down near where
New
the
Road?
St. Cecilia
Oh,
Church.
down on Old Ridge Road.
Yeah, on Old Ridge Road. It was a
So first Monmouth Junction School, St. Cecilia property.
Well, it was near, it wasn't.
By the Gottschalks or the Lenharts down that area?
Well, I don't know
Yeah.
those names.
Oh,
I
okay.
just put near.
But it was the Old Ridge Road.
Mhm.
It was level crossing, the grade crossing there, before the bridge was put up.
Mhm.
And now maybe the new school was done about the one on New Road, real early 1900s. And because I guess you've heard the story of little Pearl Emmons was killed.
Was killed on a railroad, yes.
Coming home from school, she'd forgotten her galoshes. She ran back.
And that school was built then.
Yes, she was
that school.
attending that school.
Was that E-M-M-O-N-S or E-N-S? Which
I don't
Emmons?
know.
It was-
Okay,
I
I'll just
don't
put
know
a
which
question.
It was
Mine
the
belonged.
same Emmons that lived in Monmouth Junction, right? Though it was.
Well, there was
Or
two
there
Emmonses.
were two Emmonses?
You know,
Oh.
they had that trouble there with the mail or something. So one said he'd spell his with an O, and the other one said
Oh, okay.
with the E.
Is that how that happened?
Yeah.
Okay.
So they got that straightened out.
And when was that? Do you recall when that was?
Pearl and I think it's
Okay.
in my other stuff.
That's all right.
But I
Okay.
prepared, but I could give you later on.
What else was going on at Ridge Road at that time? We're up to almost 19.
I might just backtrack a little bit on the second building.
Mhm.
You
Fine.
know, all the children from down in the Monmouth Junction area all came up to Ridge School before they got their building there in, I think it was the late 1800s, built there on Old Ridge Road. But, my husband's mother
Second Ridge School.
accommodated students from all the
Monmouth
Monmouth
Junction
Junction
area.
area.
Okay.
Because she came up and her mother had made provisions how they did with the trustees to buy a seat, you know, and they had bought the seat for my mother-in-law.
Okay.
But also, I should have said my mother attended the second Ridge School. And she used to say that when they played ball at recess time, they used the apple trees for bases. So when she went to a ball game later on, it was so odd to see pads and not trees for the bases. And then another story she used to tell was they naturally had to get a bucket of water from the neighbor across the road who had an open well. And this lady that lived there, Odile Brewer, who must have loved the kids because she'd go out and talk with them when they came over for water. And this one day, Margaret had gone over with them for water, and Deal noticed the warts on her hand. And Deal says, "I can get rid of those warts for you." So she picked up a little stone, and she rubbed the warts with the stone. Then she told Mom to back up to the well. And she threw the stone over my shoulder and landed in the well.
Oh, that's a cute story, yeah.
And
Still had the warts.
well, for a while, and they say they did gradually disappear, but Mom never gave the stone any credit for this.
Good for her.
We better pick up now where we left off before.
Well, we were really speaking about the schools.
You know,
And I think we're up to around 1923, 1931.
Yes, that was it. That was when the students from the school were bused to Dayton, and then Ridge School was sold, and Mr. George Perrine purchased it and converted into a dwelling.
That was in,
He must have bought it in 1931 and rented it out, and then here, now this last year, it's on the market again, and so I just close with what does the future hold for this former schoolhouse.
That would be interesting. Okay, so your brothers, they were younger, so they went to Dayton School?
Yes.
Did
they
you go to Dayton
finished
School
it.
also?
I went from January to June.
1923.
31. And Mrs. Dowden, her teacher,
And then where did you go?
Princeton High
To
School.
Princeton, okay. Do you happen to remember when we first started sending the children to Princeton High School?
No.
So we can say 1931 at least.
Yes, I don't think we were the first.
No,
I know.
my father went to Princeton.
That would be when, but
He was born 1911.
Well, did he go to the old high school or the new?
I don't know. He went to Princeton High School for 3 years, and then he went to vocational for 1 year. But for 3 years he went to Princeton High School.
And some of the other children went to,
Yeah, I guess some to Hightstown too, I think. According to where you lived, and, because
okay, and you graduated from Princeton, and then
Yes.
what did you do?
I became a proofreader at the Princeton University Press.
That was interesting.
Yes, some days it was, and some days according to what you had to work with.
Princeton University Press.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I worked there for 10 years. And then I married and been a homemaker since.
Married
Charles
Clayton.
Clayton.
And you lived on Ridge Road when you got married, or did you live in South Brunswick also?
On Ridge Road.
Never get off of Ridge,
No,
did you?
I know. I just couldn't seem to leave.
And that same house that you always lived in?
Yeah, that's what we went to housekeeping, yes. And you asked me about a picture. I didn't know whether you wanted, this is a different one than what I had sent to Kathy, because this shows that we did have the barn and things too.
And this is a picture of, right in the back?
Yes, yeah.
Of the,
It's Clayton home, yeah.
right. And how old was that?
Well,
That you allowed them to tear down?
Well, the people bought it, so we didn't have anything to say. 83
Okay.
to 95, it was destroyed.
Remember that, take a picture of that too, because that is on the,
Let me just take this for a second and I'll just photograph this.
Is that off now? Oh,
no, we're still on. So you raised your family there?
Yes, we had 2 boys and a girl, Kenneth Carrie, and Carol.
Okay. Now, you didn't, we skipped your mom and dad. We skipped a generation.
Well,
And they always lived on Ridge Road also.
my mother did. My father came from Monroe, down near Monmouth Junction, or
Jamesburg.
yes. And it's kind of an interesting story. They met at a party up in the house, which later they bought as a residence. And it's across from the rink property. It's where the nursery seems to be established
The
there.
big one on the hill? The big house on the hill?
Yes,
Mhm.
yeah, and of course that, when we lived there, the house was a large house because we rented part of it out. But the barn was a tremendous big building, but that, when the floods lived in the area, he bought that property, and he tore the barn down eventually.
I remember there was a fire in that big
remember
house
that.
one time too. There was a fire there one time.
Well, it could have been.
I
In the
remember
house.
those barns. Maybe you would probably, it's later that you would remember the
Yeah.
fire.
Probably in the late 50s.
So
fine.
who originally, do you have any idea who built that home?
According to the old, can I get up and get
Sure,
my other thing?
Here, let me sit this down.
The culvert, according to an old map.
And your dad, your husband was a farmer in Monroe?
My father was,
Your
yes.
father.
Now this is what I'm talking about, that large building. You recognize
See
that?
that?
I'd have to, I can bring it up here.
I remember that.
Oops, let me try to get this.
Flood home at that time.
You're welcome.
I'm just going to try to find that. The 1876 map says that Culver owns it.
Culver owned Old Flood. And that's where you lived?
Yeah, we lived there, I guess, about 7 years. And my father at that time had cows. He was in the milk business, and used to take the milk over to Route 27 there. And Raymond Road, they had a little meeting center where the farmers would bring in their cans of milk each morning, and the truck would pick it up and take it down to
That was
Brunswick.
Raymond Road on
Yes, and have it in pasteurizing. But then back to the farm, the state was getting more particular, requiring that you put in the large tanks and all different things like that. But he wasn't making enough off it. He couldn't go into that expense of setting up new equipment and all, so he just sold out.
And I see your dad had horses that he farmed with.
Yes, they're the
Did you get them?
I didn't, I can.
Jack and Jenny, the mules. And that's when my father then became an employee of Princeton Nurseries.
Okay, then that's when you moved up to the,
Yeah, first we moved over next door, I might say, the little house where Gaylord's
Right.
property. See, the farmers had also purchased that farm at that time. So we lived in there for 3 years, and then my father was there on Ridge Road. So then we moved down into the old Stout homestead. And that, I was just looking last night, about the earliest record of that farm is 1715. It had been purchased by a Johnson's, and because then the history is very scanty. And
that includes the Gaylord and the flood farm?
no, I'm not sure of either of those. I know it does not include the flood farm, but now the Gaylord.
The Gaylord's home was built in 1715?
No,
No, just the property.
The property may have gone up that far because it was a pretty good-sized plantation, and in the years of history, it
That's the old,
been
old
sold off.
So the Stouts owned a farm?
The old Stout homestead. I'm sure
Right.
you would recognize
Right.
that.
Mm-hmm. That's where the Shooks live now.
Well, that is one of the. That's not the homestead.
That's not the homestead.
The homestead was destroyed here when they built the school. Well, it was destroyed before that, and when Phipps bought the ground, and then they just demolished the buildings. And where the Shooks live is a 2-acre, or was at that time. It's less than that now because Gus sold some of the ground. It was built for one of the Stout, the farmer Stout, who started the lumber business in Monmouth Junction.
That's
it was built for him, and then of course, as you know, eventually his family grew up, and he and Annie decided they wanted a new house down in Monmouth Junction, so they built what is known as the Pearson house.
Yeah, beautiful house. Yeah.
So at one time the Pearson home was a Stout home.
It was built by Arnold and Annie Stout.
Okay. And you
You want to talk about the old farm? Then when Flemmers purchased the Stout homestead, he set out the peach orchard, 40 acres in peaches, and there was an apple orchard on the farm. So
peach and apple. And how many acres was that?
it was 40 acres of new peach trees he put out.
Peach and apple.
Oh, the apples,
But they're already.
I think they were all there. I don't recall planting apples. Let's see. During the Second World War, the nursery raised peas and tomatoes, and to help in the harvesting of them, Mr. Flemmer went to Fort Dix and had prisoners, the German prisoners, brought up each day to help with the farm work.
Do you remember anything about a prison camp in World War I back over off of Stouts Lane anywhere?
No, that was just, well, I was born in 17, so it was just about.
Yeah, okay.
But I never heard a reference made to that.
Because we've had references from a couple people about there was some type of either a prison camp for either like soldiers or some other type of prison camp up where Levy's or the old chemical plant was. Somewhere in that area, back in the like World War I era.
Isn't that interesting? I never heard that.
Tony's mom remembers it, and I have a cousin who remembered it. They used to play ball, the Monmouth Junction baseball team used to play baseball there against the prisoners on Sundays.
But they didn't know where nobody knew where the prisoners came from. They didn't know if they were prisoners of war or conscientious, but they knew there was something like that to do with World War I.
That's interesting. The only thing I've ever heard about down around Levy's area are the kilns, remains of some kilns, because Stouts used to have manure brought out from New York.
Mm-hmm. Right,
You know,
the old
and-
manure dumps.
Yeah, and had it kind of dried or,
Mhm.
you know, and they said the
When-
perfume was terrible.
That was the stouts, and also were the weights involved in that process? Would you remember? Those two.
I don't know that name, other than Dayton, or Dean's Law, and the wheats over in Dean's.
Yes,
But I didn't know we
and
had
see,
any.
on one of the other interviews, they referred to the weights. So maybe it was the stouts and the weights.
Well, Arnold Stout married a wheat.
Oh, see, there you go.
Mhm.
Okay.
So,
Okay. So in World War II, you were married, right?
I
Not
wasn't
yet,
married,
not yet.
no.
No, you were at Princeton
Just
University,
came, yeah,
and your
took a class.
brothers, both brothers went to service?
Yes, yeah.
What were their names?
Theodore or Ted or Bub, she was known as in the early days, but when he married, his wife said, no more Bub, this is going to be Ted.
Well, I know that feeling.
Oh.
And he was a pilot?
No, which one? Theodore, no, it was in ground for work.
Well, that's okay.
And what was the other brother's name?
Richard.
Richard.
Dick. And he was the pilot.
That was
Richard.
Dick Stout or Dick Stewart?
Richard
Kenny.
Kenny.
Oh, Kenny. Okay,
Kenny.
I'm sorry. I'm getting confused on the
Yeah.
names now.
Clayton Kenny.
Okay, right.
Yeah. And see, when he was training for his pilot business, he'd come home and Mom would say, well, I suppose you'll be having to go overseas shortly, and we never will know when you go because everything was kept pretty secretive and all.
Mhm.
Oh, he says, don't worry. He says, I'll give you a buzz. So somehow, when it was time to leave, the formation was going somewhat in this area, and he dropped out and buzzed.
Buzzed the farm, huh?
And so then picked up and got back in his squadron again. And he said that, well, he didn't fear it because the country was in so need of pilots, and they had spent all this money training him. You know, they weren't going to send him back from England, so he went on his merry way. But I wasn't home; I was at work. But my sister says the dishes in the closet rattled.
He really came close.
Gave us all a buzz.
Now, he was in Germany? Germany?
Yes, it was based in England, of course, and flew over into Germany to drop there.
I can remember the article in the paper, but I just,
He just died in March.
yes, yes. And he had so many missions, or what was it,
Oh,
that he was
yes.
really cited?
Yes, he had, well, there again, do you want some of that detail,
think-
or that's?
Sure.
Because I
Well-
think Kathy wants to recognize some
Mhm.
people who did
Sure, the
some.
veterans,
Oh.
sure.
Well,
Mhm.
I'll just get his other scrapbook if I may.
Okay.
Rick.
This is the funeral, but I can't find the obituary.
The picture of this plane.
This is a model they just dedicated down in the Air Force in Colorado, and the family had his name put in the list of the.
It was a fighter plane or bomber?
Bomber, B-17.
Well, that's okay.
Yeah,
But it gave a little more description of his.
well, anything, you can just say what you remember, that's all. You don't have to show us the thing. Yeah.
I mean, better to give you the facts.
That's right, yeah.
It's not the facts, man.
Here we are, here we are.
Okay.
Okay.
See,
Lieutenant Colonel.
yeah. He served in the, also in the Korean War and the Vietnam War, and then he retired in 1970. He flew 55 combat missions over Europe.
That's double the amount that they usually flew.
And he made 25 missions in the B-17 and 30 missions in the Mark Mosquito bomber.
That's a British plane.
Yeah, and it was wooden.
Yes, it was a wooden British Air Force plane.
We didn't remember him ever telling us. Well, when there's service, they don't, I guess,
That's
like to
for sure.
talk that much about it. So that at the funeral service, the person in charge made that notation that it was a mosquito bomber.
And that was still World War II.
Yes. And of course, he's received many medals
And his medals
and
were
honors. Oh, there's a whole list of them, and just many medals and honors.
Korea and Vietnam. Okay.
Well, I guess that's about all about it.
And any of the brothers and sisters still live in Monmouth in South Brunswick?
No, my living sister is in Delaware, Anna Grove.
So we're over here in Wadenwood because of the high school.
Well, we had sold before the high school became. See, that property, when Mr. Flemmer sold it to the Phipps people, while we were going to have a big research center, the governor came down in a bus with a group of businessmen. And
Remember which governor?
No, I don't.
We could have a timeline there, that's all.
Well,
Don't, that's okay. So that's that, he sold that property and the property across the street to the Phipps estate.
yeah.
So that was quite a while back.
No, to the Phipps, only the property, all property he owned on the north side of Ridge Road.
Okay.
Because it was to be tied in with the research and things up
Was
over
that
in the
after World
plains
War
where-
II?
Oh, yes, that was here about 60.
I remember
when they
my
sold
dad
that
talking
at
about
Phipps.
that.
Well, then, see, it sort of lay idle. The times weren't right, they said, to go on and develop it. And the next thing we saw in the paper, it had been sold to this Cavendish group. And they were great plans. They were going to have a research park. There was going to be, and you know, with this commercial center. And it was at that time when they were picking up little loose pieces of ground, and our property was in their way, so they wanted ours. And over on Route 1, they wanted Ed Harm's ground, and there was another property or two in there they needed, so they could face Route 1 and Ridge Road. And they were waiting for good times to develop so they could start building, and it didn't so happen. Next thing we knew, that had been turned over to a group called Heritage Center, and it was from them that the township, or the school board, purchased this 80 acres, because as you know, the remaining is sort of in limbo yet as to what they're going to do with the remaining acre. Well, it was when Cavendish owned it at that point, that's when we sold and came over here, because they were big time. There was going to be a beautiful campus with copy the old stone,
They were,
that structure. They were going to keep that and then just build all their buildings to match that stone. If you can imagine the kind of money he was talking about. Even Princeton University will no longer build the stone.
Mhm. And they were from Canada, if I remember, or were they? They were Canadian, I don't know.
I'm not sure they were connected with the Arabians, the Arabs there somehow. There was some financial dealings with them too. So I guess that
Well,
brings me.
we want to thank you because you certainly have a lot of records here that,
Sorry, I'm so kind of not able to bring them up like I
yes,
should.
but I think maybe sometime that you may be able to give Mrs. Thorpe or someone if they have a little question in their mind.
Well, I'd be glad to share what I have here, but
And I'm sure you're going to remember a lot of things you didn't tell us,
oh,
as everyone does.
I know, that's truly, I will be thinking, why didn't I?
That seems to happen to